everyone, and welcome to the 9th broadcast of the Nerdflix podcast. Today is our last episode covering the Star Wars saga. Part 5 of our 5-part Star Wars special, the big finale. It's been a long 5 weeks, and it's finally time for a final Star Wars episode. And we will be finishing off the Star Wars series with Solo, a Star Wars story, and Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So, let's get started. Hey, it's time for Nerdflix! Welcome to the Nerdflix podcast. The first movie we'll be covering today is Solo, a Star Wars story. This movie came out back in 2018, and I found it pretty good. This movie made the least money out of all Star Wars movies ever put out there, and some people didn't like it as much, but I found it a very entertaining story. This is the backstory on Han Solo, the classic Star Wars character. It's about Han and all the adventures he has, how he meets Lando, how he gets the classic Millennium Falcon, and I found it a really good movie. In this movie, Han is on this planet called Corellia, where he's living in these weird sewer pits, where he's ruled by this strange worm queen. And throughout the movie, he escapes, he becomes a stormtrooper, he meets Chewbacca, and he ends up with this gang of basically bounty hunters doing a job that involves a basically Star Wars-like train. And most of the gang of bounty hunters ends up dying in that scene, except for one. And Han Solo, Chewbacca, and the last bounty hunter team up for the rest of the movie till the bounty hunter betrays him towards the end. And then at the end we see Darth Maul for the first time in a live-action Star Wars film since The Phantom Menace. And that is where Solo ends. At one point in the movie, particularly early on in the movie, we have an epic speeder chase with a Han and a speeder that he stole being chased by some people also in speeders. And this scene was pretty entertaining, but some of the early ideas for the scene would have actually been a lot different. One of the earlier ideas for the scene was to have a conveyor belt building TIE fighters and have the TIE fighter cockpit roll off the conveyor belt and bounce around like bowling balls, like it's pinball or something, and to have Han Solo in his speeder trying to dodge them and not get hit, which would have been very entertaining but also a little strange and silly for a Star Wars movie. So I see why they did cut it. Chewbacca's been in a lot of Star Wars movies. He's been in Revenge of the Sith, all of the original trilogy, and all of the sequels. But he's never had that big starring role. Of course, he's been a main character, but he's never been front and center. But in this movie, Solo, him and Han Solo are the two big main characters. So for this Chewbacca costume, they had to go all out. They had 8 different Chewbacca costumes and 10 different Chewbacca heads. That's a lot of Wookiee. Chewbacca's been in a lot of Star Wars movies. He's been in Revenge of the Sith, all of the original trilogy, and all of the sequels. But he's never had that big starring role. Of course, he's been a main character, but he's never been front and center. But in this movie, Solo, him and Han Solo are the two big main characters. So for this Chewbacca costume, they had to go all out. They had 8 different Chewbacca costumes and 10 different Chewbacca heads. That's a lot of Wookiee. When they were designing the speeders for this movie, they did a lot of kit bashing, a phrase used meaning that taking something that's meant for one thing and turning it into another thing, such as buying a model car kit and turning it into a time machine, I don't know. But they did a lot of kit bashing to make these speeders, including scrapping other bits of Star Wars stuff from past movies. Han Solo's speeder actually includes pieces from Anakin's pod racer in Phantom Menace. It's not that easy to see because they kind of repainted them and reshaped them, but they still used pieces from Anakin's original pod racer from Phantom Menace. One of the characters in this movie, named Moloch, is chasing Han Solo in the speeder scene, and he's mostly seen throughout the first half of the movie, and he carries around this big wooden staff, and on the staff has a number of faces. One of these faces we see looks more like Earth-like than space-like. A face is wearing glasses and is on his staff is actually the face of the designer who made the staff. He was carving it and he thought, hey, wouldn't it be fun to carve in his own face? So if you see a face on there with the glasses on him, that is the designer's face that he put on the staff. At one point on the movie, they're on this strange space yacht for this big warlord rich guy in Star Wars, and he has this big bar area with lots of display cases. And if you look very closely in those display cases, you can see a lot of references to the classic films Indiana Jones. You can see the golden idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Sandaraka stones from the Temple of Doom, and the Holy Grail from The Last Crusade. Those are some cool Easter eggs in Solo to another really good movie series. One thing I do want to mention that doesn't directly relate to Solo but has something to do with Han Solo is that Chris Pratt, the actor who played Star-Lord in Guardians of the Galaxy, took inspiration from Han Solo to play that character. You can see where there is some resemblance. It's a similar topic. It's space, it's adventure, it's sci-fi, and Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord, you can see where there's some similarities to Han Solo. So actor Chris Pratt, playing Star-Lord, took inspiration from Harrison Ford's character Han Solo. Another thing I want to mention that covers this movie, The Force Awakens, and the next movie we'll be talking about is a speeder that keeps constantly appearing in backgrounds of Star Wars movies. This speeder appeared in the background on Corellia in Solo, appeared in the background in Force Awakens, and in Rogue One. This speeder just keeps getting moved around to set, from movie to movie, to be put in the background of all three of those movies. The next movie we will talk about today is Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. This movie is really good. This is one of the best Star Wars movies. Not the best, but one of the best. This movie provides a lot of background information as to how the rebels got the Death Star plans in A New Hope. In fact, it revolves mostly around that. It revolves mostly around the opening crawl in A New Hope, and it is a really good movie. This movie is about a character named Jyn Erso, the daughter of one of the lead designers of the Death Star. And she goes on an adventure and ends up with rebels, and ends up with the rebels Kazin and K2SO, a very witty, sarcastic, reprogrammed Imperial droid now working for the rebels, and they must receive the Death Star plans to get them to the rebels, so the rebels have a chance against this big Death Star. And the movie was quite good, except for there was one twist that had to happen. It wasn't much of a twist because you could see it coming because that had to happen. This movie takes place before A New Hope, and since these are big characters and we don't see these characters in the original trilogy, all the main characters had to die by the end of the movie, and they did. By the end of the movie, all the main characters were basically just all dead, and the end of the movie was kind of sad, but it set up some really other good movies and gave us some background information on a cool plot line. In this movie, they made 360-degree sets, a set that you can film from any angle, perfect for filming from any angle. No matter where you were, the set was always set up perfectly 360 degrees around so they could film anywhere from any angle. Since the set was 360 degrees around, the actors were told that they could move freely throughout the set, and it would end up that the camera used to have to pan from side to side to follow these actors all the way around, which also meant a lot of times the crew would have to jump out of frame before they got in the shot because this camera's just going around in unpredictable ways. So it came to the fact that they had the crew dress up in Star Wars costumes so that if the camera panned around to them, they wouldn't have to jolt out real quick because they would always blend in. So this is a really cool idea, and I think they should use this technique for many other movies. If you look at some of these small details in Rogue One, such as their wardrobe, you'll see one of the main characters, Cassian Andor's jacket, resembles a familiar jacket we see in a very good Star Wars film. I'm talking about the jacket Han Solo wears on Hoth in Empire Strikes Back. Cassian's jacket very much resembles Han's jacket. I don't know if plot-wise that has anything to do with it, or they just took an inspiration from it when they were designing it, but it's a pretty cool detail. In this movie, you're also introduced to some characters, two people known as the Guardians of the Whills, two very different characters who just kind of hang out with each other, because, well, they're the Guardians of the Whills, but they're very different, but they're a classic Star Wars duo, and we see them throughout the movie and they end up being very main characters. But these Guardians of the Whills are actually a very good reference to something I mentioned earlier on my podcast. By earlier, I mean 2 episodes ago when we covered the original trilogy. I talked about the original idea for the name of Star Wars was to be... Now, I'm going to try and recite this as best as possible. I don't have it written down this time. I don't even remember. But one part of it was called Taken from the Journals of the Whills, which is a fun reference that this movie put in was Guardians of the Whills, which is a cool reference to the original name for Star Wars, A New Hope. One idea for some of the main characters to be featured in this movie was to have a pair of giant green aliens named Sheena and Lunka to basically stick together the entire movie and follow the rest of the main characters around, similar to all the main characters do in the final cut of the movie. But they would have been like 2 big green cartoony alien pair that just kind of followed everyone around, and it wasn't the best idea for a character, and I see why they replaced it, but it still would have been interesting. In this movie, we return to Yavin 4, or I guess I shouldn't say return because it technically takes place before New Hope, so this is technically the first time we see Yavin 4, but in our case, in the audience's case, we are returning to Yavin 4. And since we are returning to Yavin 4, it is appropriate to return to the set of Yavin 4. They used the exact same set they shot Yavin 4 on back in 1977. Now in 2016, they are using the exact same set they shot Yavin 4 on for Yavin 4 in Rogue One. One final thing that I do want to bring up that's less of a fact, more of something I just want to bring to your attention so you can see what you think about this. The name of the planet where Jyn is from in Rogue One is called Wobani. Wobane. And if you spend some time mixing these letters around, you can get Obi-Wan, the first name of the classic Star Wars character Obi-Wan Kenobi. That might be hinting to something, that might be a coincidence, that just might be because, it would be funny or something. But I just want to bring that to your attention, take that as you will. Determine if it's a Easter egg, a reference, a setup, or a coincidence. I myself think it's a coincidence, or maybe a funny joke played by the writers, but I don't think it's really a setup for anything, but see what you think. In honor of the last part of our Star Wars series, we're going to have some people on the show today telling us what their favorite Star Wars movie is, and who their favorite Star Wars character is. Okay, now we have my friend Nathan on the phone. Nathan, tell us what your favorite Star Wars movie is and why.
I like the first one, probably because, it's an original, and
so
it's just cool.
Yeah, so A New Hope?
Yeah, New Hope, yeah.
And who is your favorite Star Wars character and why?
Oh boy. It's a tie between Han Solo and Luke. I like Luke because, he's the main character. He's just really cool. And then Han Solo, what is there not to like about him?
Yeah, good point. Alright, well, thanks for being on. Okay, now I have my friend Elijah on the phone. Elijah, what is your favorite Star Wars movie and why?
Personally, I've got to go with The Empire Strikes Back. It's just got everything that a Star Wars movie should have, and it's just an instant classic.
Yes, definitely. And what is your favorite Star Wars character and why?
I don't know what a lot of other people think about it, but personally, I like the B-1 battle droids. I think they're just a good comedic relief while also providing decent soldiers at the same time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on, Elijah. Okay, now we're going to be asking the same question we've been asking people over the phone, but this time in person. Welcome, you are the first person to be in person on the Nerdflix podcast. This is my dad here.
Hi, it's an honor to be the first one.
Now, what is your favorite Star Wars movie and why?
Well, it's the original one, A New Hope, because first off, it was the original, and it's just the best balance of action and excitement and world building of all the movies.
And who's your favorite Star Wars character and why?
Well, it's Han Solo, because you don't know if he's good, you don't know if he's bad. He's a little bit of both. He's his own person, and Harrison Ford's a great actor.
All right, excellent answers. Thanks for being on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, that is all we have for today. Today is the last part of the Star Wars series, so join us next week when we do our 10th episode, our first episode that we've done in a while that's not Star Wars. We'll be covering the Indiana Jones movies. Thanks to everyone who participated today and answered my questions. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next week on Nerdflix.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.